Hello and welcome to Books Up Close. I'm Chris Lloyd. This is the Close Reading Show for readers, writers, and anyone interested in how texts get made. In today's show, I talk to the Kieran Yates. If anyone knows me, you know that we're BFFs, but let's just pretend I'm being really objective here. Kieran Yates is a London-based journalist and author who has written everywhere from The Guardian and The Independent to Dazed and Vice. Her debut book, All the Houses I've Ever Lived In, is a meditation on home and the politics of the housing crisis. And that is the book we're talking about today. Listeners, if you've got it, turn to page 11. If you don't have it, what are you doing with your life? Go buy it. Kieran, thank you so much for doing this with me.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
So good to talk to you. I've been begging you to do this forever. And now we're making it happen.
Hey.
And this book came out a while ago. I wonder how you feel about reflecting on it now, what your relationship is to it at this point.
Well, I think that it was probably the right decision to do a narrative nonfiction piece of text. So it felt like, the politics wasn't so dominant. It's like kind of bubbling under, and because of that, it doesn't feel so outdated, And so, I read it last year, and I thought, yeah, actually, that stands up. I agree with my points, and yeah, it doesn't feel like it was of another time. Whereas some other things that I've written definitely do. From the first line, I'm like, oh, want the internet to scrub that.
Yeah, writing to the current moment is hard, right? And when we live in the cursed timeline where everything catches up with us within a week these days, that you're like, okay, well, nothing can be said anymore, right?
And I think the nature of memoir writing kind of saves you from that a little bit, because you're looking back, but crucially have enough time to reflect, to meditate and think. And so you don't have to do those hot takes in the way that you often have to do as a journalist. And so you're like, oh, this is what I feel about those things that have transpired.
Right. We'll talk more about your writing practice later, because that is one of the things, it's a very different kind of writing from what you've done before. Before we go there, how do you feel about close reading? I mean, we did a literature degree together.
We did.
But I wonder how you feel about it now as a practice or an approach.
Well, I think it is figurative and literal for me. As a journalist, so much of my practice is about, fastidious fact checking, and there's always the example used of the New Yorker fact checkers that are word by word. But I mean, even so, I often have done line by line by editors, and they're like, how does this make you feel? How does it make you think? What does it make you think about? So part of reading closely is literal, making sure those facts make sense, making sure the quotes are accurate, making sure you know exactly what you think when you say something and you hear something, and when you're on the internet being like, oh, actually, what does that make me think about? And then also figurative, you are allowed this kind of a luxury that we exist in this liminal space of the writer world, where we're able to think in abstracts a lot of the time. So, you're kind of closely reading, but you're taking a step back from that and really meditating deeply sometimes on a sentence, and coming back and being like, oh yeah, I think I know how I feel about that.
Yeah. And in this book, I know you call it memoir, but you are juggling or you're spinning many plates at once, or juggling many things at once. And that's one of why I picked this section, because I feel like you do this thing throughout the book where you're like, here's me, here's my context, but also here's a broader cultural context. And also here's the historical sweep, but also here's the politics. And I'm I don't know, rereading it, I'm kind of amazed how you can do that in one sentence to the next. Right. And I kind of we'll talk through some of that here. But yeah, interesting that you're doing, does the sentence make sense? Is it accurate? Are my facts right? Is everything in place? But also, is it evoking the feeling I want? Are the words the right ones here? How much is too much? How much embellishment am I doing? Which is a relevant word for what we're about to hear.
Mm-hmm. But also, like, you know, as you know, on our literature degree, like, so much of it was like reading those texts and those novels. And then the other half of it was like understanding the history and society and politics of the time. And that really resonated with me. And, you know, that kind of formed the basis of the writing that I would go on to do, which is like that delicate balance between those two modes of thinking. And, you know, I also think that even though some of the texts were like pre 1900, it kind of brought that into the present because I was like, oh, yeah, political conflict, I get that. Oh, yeah, societal conflict and push and pull, yeah, I get that. And I think I needed that kind of grounding because, you know, it's a working class writer, as you know, like we maybe didn't grow up with the literary canon in our houses. And so, so much of that was alien to me, but society I got.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I would agree. It was very historical, actually. Now you say it, and so much was like these
Yeah.
contexts. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, you know, it was just like straight in with like, well, obviously you know about like the English Civil War. I was like, kinda. I'm like, do I need to know that to read this book? Like, oh yeah, maybe I do. And then it's like, well, also the sweep of colonialism. I'm like, cool, cool, cool. Googling like, when is this period, right?
hmm
So yeah, I think that that definitely shows in your work all the time, right? You're interested in how things emerge in space and time, right? Whether you're writing about grime or as in grime music, as well as like grime in this book in a very different context. And that, yeah, that contextualization is really interesting for me here. So why don't we hear this passage now, which is from the Beresford Road chapter. People, if you haven't read the book, each chapter is a different place that you have lived in your life. And each of those homes or houses is kind of like a little portal into like a bigger conversation. And this chapter is in Beresford Road, and it's a kind of portal to like the household object in a way, right? And here we're going to hear a bit of that.
There are specific objects in every home that transport us. In mine is a copy of my Nana G's tissue box, a memento of historical decadence. These days, the tissue boxes you see in most South Asian homes are cheaper, mass produced plastic copies of the original versions that were made of precious metal. These boxes are adorned with fake velour, usually in black, red, or navy, and covered in embossed yellow orange plastic to mimic Indian 22 karat gold, fashioned into patterns of intricate vines or leaves or flowers, and shipped across oceans so that we might all experience some lux in our lives. As a child, I would eye my Nanaji's tissue box with intrigue and awe. This lump of real gold, excavated and carved especially for us from God knows where. Once, I acquired a gold pen and got to work seeing what else I could gild, applying a DIY Midas touch to various unassuming objects to make them special screws, chairs, door frames. For all their ability to fool a child, the sound of these boxes is what gives them away. If you tap one with an acrylic nail, like I often do now, there is no resonant ting, but a hollow clattering sound. Our soundscapes are formed early and are uniquely attached to our interior environment, and my young eye was tricked, so for a while I thought all gold sounded like that. The story of how these tissue boxes journeyed to Britain is hard to pin down. Their ownership is contested across the global south, but it seems most likely that they are a remnant of the Mughal dynasty, which ruled India from 1526 to 1857. Mughal emperors often embellish metal boxes originally used for holding perfumes, or betel boxes used for storing tobacco leaves, with rich textiles and gem set jewellery, transforming courts into luxury residences.
Thank you so much. I love hearing you read it. Primarily because, and yes, I know you and love you, but like I associate your writing very much with voice, right? Like you're not a journalist that shies away from like the you-ness of the voice, right? In a way that sometimes we go to journalism for some objectivity, right? But like you always place yourself very firmly in the work. And I think this passage is a really good example of where you are a playing with voice, right? Of like I'm being a bit objective here or a bit like zoomed out, and then I go straight in. I like even the like I often do now bit, right? That little parenthetical where you like bring us immediately into like the texture of what you might be doing, or even the from God knows where, right? Which is very like voicey. But then the opening is like there are specific objects in every home that transport us, right? Like very like neutral sentence. In mine, comma, it's a copy like straight away we've moved from this like generalized like thesis statement about objects to here's my experience. And I'm really interested in that kind of, you could easily write this book in a more zoomed out way, right? There are specific objects in every home. For example, people in this culture do this kind of thing or whatever, but you go straight to in mine, that grounding move. And I wonder,
I
yeah, I
think
wonder what you think
any
about that and
text
how
that
you were
you
thinking about
write
it as you were
needs to sound
writing.
like you, and also it needs to contain the multitudes that you do as a person. So even though you kind of might know things academically or journalistically, you're still a person in the world. You're still a working class person, you're still a brown woman, you are still operating in these circles, you still have a Chris in your life. And so I think that, quite often it is difficult maybe to incorporate both those things for a lot of writers. And I mean, it's been difficult for me as well, but I've had years of practice. So now it feels like it is part of my duty to represent that and represent that kind of difference. And, being in the publishing world has really made me feel different because I'm like, oh, of course, like I look and sound and feel before we even talk about academic qualification so different to a lot of the people that are reading my work. And I think that that's kind of important to exist on the page as you do in life.
Yeah, but I think that if that like self training to like know to do that in the second sentence, right? To go like I'm going to do the broad sentence, but I have to immediately move it, and like that's unconscious, I guess, but like instinct that you do it. And in mine, it's a copy of my Nana G's tissue box and like important specificity, but then a memento of historical decadence, which is such like a fun little phrase, right? Like, but historical decadence is like a great phrase, as though it's decadent now, but it's also decadent with history, right? It's not just like decadence from the past, but decadence of the past, I guess, which is like kind of what you're describing.
Yeah, this object in particular, but a lot of objects that are like intimately connected to us are so imbued with something, whether that's history or sentimentalism or memory or something to do with us. And I think that they're too often overlooked maybe, but definitely like not really studied and thought about. And I think that that was really important to me in this book, to be like, these things are important, so are you, and we can resist all those feelings, all those factors, real or imagined, that makes us feel not so.
And it like the us, like you use that pronoun us, right? Like that transport us, not that transport me, or like I don't know, the use of the we and the us in this book is quite important as a this isn't just like your experience or something that people are like, well, that's just like Kieran's version of the world. But you're kind of like, no, we all have this.
And I also think that nonfiction has a reputation for being dry, and especially like housing, housing by design is so dense. I've been like, researching and been interested in housing policy for a decade, and I still don't completely understand everything that I read because it's like dense, but it's like constantly updated and constantly dense. So I feel like there's more of a responsibility when you write on this topic to make it feel alive in any way you can, because otherwise people often just turn off. And so, that is why it's important for me to have that kind of fictive quality when you read it and you're like, oh, okay, I'm in either on the personal element of storytelling or on your voice.
Yeah, like, you've gone from like the broad, there are specific objects, to in mine, it's a copy. And then these
Mm-hmm.
days, the tissue boxes you most see in most South Asian houses, right? So we've zoomed out
Mm-hmm.
again, right? Are
Mm-hmm.
cheaper, mass produced plastic copies of the original version.
Mm-hmm.
So like we've gone like out, in, back out, this kind of like concertinaing of,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, perspective and like scale, I suppose. And that idea of plastic copies of the original versions. And throughout this whole chapter, you're talking about the like copies as being as meaningful as the originals, right?
Yeah.
They're like, actually the copy like contains as much of that past as the originals do. And I think it's just an interesting reading that you don't go down the whole like everything's a simulation, right? Like this is not a postmodern kind of reading, right? This is actually in everyone's culture and world, you might have like the plasticky version of the thing, but it's still the thing, right? It's not like emptied of meaning, but actually it's like fuller of meaning somehow.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot that's talked about that rupturing of identity that immigration gives us.
Yeah.
And a lot of immigrants have that experience of an identity that is like, dual, but also so fragmented. And one way that they've created, I guess, to remedy this is like this cultural production of facsimiles, and there are facsimiles everywhere to remind you not only of home, but to like give you a sense of grounding and having a stake in the society that you occupy. Now, that's not something that I like feel as a diaspora kid, but also like I really feel like I'm at home many places, as the book attests. So I'm fascinated by those stories from my grandparents who like talk about the way in which they struggle to have a stake in a place that I feel so uncomfortable.
Yeah. And that mimicking, right, is like the word you used, is like, and fashioned into intricate patterns and shipped across oceans so that we might all experience some lux in our lives, which is like lovely, right? The sibilance of shipped across oceans, like quite softer than like the lux in our lives, which is like a funny like wry phrase, right? And is very you, but also that is the desire, right, of like people who are moving across oceans to be like, how do I find home, meaning, luxury, softness, pleasure, right? The toxicity of like the migration debate is like, well, should people live in this new place? And it's like, well, like as though it's just bare minimum survival. And here we're talking about like, how do people thrive and bring cultures with them and create new cultures and share and, do you know what I mean? And like remember and live.
And how do you resist a narrative that tells you that luxury is demonized all the time?
Yeah.
And the pursuit of luxury is demonized.
Yeah. Where luxury is excess, right? Like luxury means waste. Luxury means, do you deserve it? Can you afford it? Oh, people on, benefits like buying nice phones or, whatever, like that kind of dialogue. Whereas here we're talking about like the fake villa, the mimicking of 22 karat gold, like as though beauty is only the reserve of like the rich.
Yeah, we know that like taste is rife with classism. And especially when we talk about interior design, so it's very rare that we would see the homes that you and I grew up in like the pages of Elle Decoration or like Architectural Digest. And part of that is because of the makeup of those newsrooms or those editorial processes, but also the idea that the things that you love are seen as tacky or like copies, and not good copies at that, just like landfill. And, this book is partly a love letter to that, but it's also saying that, those things which you dismiss are so important. We know that.
Yeah, we know that. And that, and then you like transition in that second paragraph there, right? Like, as a child, I would eye my Nana G's tissue box with intrigue and awe. Again, like grounding us in the very specific perspective of you, but you're like taking us to that past as well, right? This lump of real gold excavated and carved, especially from God knows where. That's both like your voice, but also like the adults around you, right? Like from God knows where.
Yeah.
Like that's your mum, that's your grandparents, right? The voice that you've absorbed as the child. once I acquired a gold pen and got to work seeing what else I could gild, applying a DIY Midas touch to various unassuming objects to make them special. Like, again, that's like you then and you now, right? This kind of back and forth. I love DIY Midas touch. I don't know, it's just like, again, giving texture to how we make meaning in our lives.
And the questions that arise when things just land in your vicinity without explanation,
Yeah.
and that's part of the work of my life and this book, of like trying to answer those questions, trying to like find threads of like a journey that a person or an object has been on.
Yeah, like you're following the objects as they move, but also like the people that are attached to those objects, right? Like it's not like no object is disconnected from its history or its context.
Yeah.
And like for all their ability to fool a child, as though they're out to do that, right? The sound of the boxes gives them away. I just love the idea that like these tissue boxes, like maybe they won't know. Whereas you look at it, you're like, this is plastic. But if you tap one with an acrylic nail, like I often do now, I wonder, like, did you think about that explicitly when you were writing? But like it's your tactile experience of the box. But like you could easily say, like, if you tap one, there is no resonant ting but a hollow clattering sound. But it's the acrylic nail that is like, well, not everyone has acrylic nail. Like this is a very particular experience of like touching the box. And I wonder, was that like conscious as you were writing, or did that just come out because that's the way you were seeing it?
Yeah, and also a very particular experience of bringing the reader with you and being like, okay, this is what you can see, but also this is who I am. So let me teach you something. That is a sound you might not know if you don't have acrylic nails, of acrylic touching plastic. That is what that makes. And I think that soundscapes are so important for a reader to understand, but it is like a constant reminder that the act of reading is a 360 experience of sound and vision, but also feel, and harking back to that whole sensory richness.
Yeah, all the senses, right? We've got like sound and touch and like sight, and but also like the smells of the living room that it's in, right? Like here you're not describing the living rooms especially, like you do in other parts of the chapter, but like again, it's like in a space, right? Even if you don't have an analogy and you don't have a tissue box, like I'm reading it and I'm thinking of like my grandparents' house, the spaces in which those objects move.
Books that really stay with me are books that do that in the most sophisticated way. They talk about a specific sense and you're like, oh, okay, I'm there. Cool.
It grounds you instantly, right? And as you say, like brings you into the world. Like it's not conflating the reader with you.
Yeah.
But you're like, come to my world. a lot
of journalism doesn't do that because that's not its intention. It's to say this thing is happening, or like this is a political landscape we're in. So these things that I overlooked are overlooked on purpose because they're not so important. And sometimes they're not to that story, but they are for something else.
Or the other is like they go to the universal, right? Like we all know this thing. It's like,
do
we? Whereas I guess you're like, no, like in these specific things, like no.
Yeah.
But then the next sentence, like our soundscapes are formed early and are uniquely attached to our interior environment. So again, that's like the zoom out, right? Like we are all affected by the sounds that we grow up in. And there's another chapter of the book that focuses especially on sound, right? And the music that leaks through the walls of, housing blocks or, wherever you're living. And how that created its own musical subculture, right? Like fascinating. Like I love that chapter so much. Things I'd never thought about before, like how like music mixing through the walls of buildings created the subculture, and be like, well, of course that song would mix with that one, right? Because I heard it. Like mind blown. But that idea of like our soundscapes are formed early, uniquely attached to our interior environment. And my young eye was tricked. So for a while I thought all girls like, so again, you're moving this back and forth, I think is like really hard to do. But you are trying to like mimic, how do we look at the, not just the literal object of the box, but like the object of like housing, right? As like a subject and an object. How do we get close to it without it just being like, here is my life story? How do I stop it from just being just my life story to this is actually telling me something much bigger about the cultures that we live in?
And how do we think about our universal biology within that? You know, like, even if you don't understand anything else about this, you understand the importance of a soundscape.
Yeah, and that our interior environments are important to how we're made.
Yeah.
Right. It's
Yeah.
not just like, it's not like nature, nurture, or like all that kind of nonsense, but rather like you
Yeah.
come from a place and that
Yes.
place is very material. Like it's not just like what kind of family did you grow up in? It's like, what was the building?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And, you know, that way of seeing, not in a John Berger
Yeah.
way, that way of seeing it is like even more sophisticated when you've lived many places, because suddenly you're like, oh yeah, these buildings are different. They do give us something else. What is the historical, social, cultural context of that, and how do we exist within them? What does that say about, you know, the time and place that we find ourselves in? Not only the time and the place that that place was built, you know what I mean?
Yep.
So, you know, when we talk about student halls, that is also a story about New Labour. Of course it is. Like, you know, to me, like, those things are so inextricably linked. And, you know, I think that that is a responsibility of a writer to look around and say, okay, these things are connected. I need to share that.
Yeah, it's important that we lived in a wild halls together. I mean, you were in the fancy bit, but like, you know, some of us were in a flat with 21 other people sharing one kitchen, right? But that like 1960s architecture was also the architecture of like my learning how to be in London, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like those aren't inextricable. Like I learned what sociality meant in a space where everyone was crammed into one part and everyone was from like slightly wild backgrounds. Like, you know, there was no like, there was a leveling, but there wasn't a leveling, right? You know, the idea of university, like you always can't, you all come in and you're all like, you start at the same place and you're like, no.
And being a product of political decisions, I think obviously happened then, but like, you know, the more you reflect on it, maybe the older that you get, you look back and you're like, oh, that is completely the case. You know, things don't just arrive by chance. Things don't just happen. And, you know, a lot of the political narrative is kind of that, like, oh, you know, we can't do anything about a neoliberal agenda, let's say, because that is the way of things. And it's like, no, that has been designed. That has not always been the case, and just doesn't have to be the case. And so that is a very simple way that we can reimagine new futures, because we need to understand that the past has not always been how it feels in the present.
Yeah, most things are not natural or inevitable.
Yeah.
You're right. Like only by attending to their contexts do you get to learn that.
Yeah. And, you know, collective amnesia on the society level, we know is so important and crucial for power. You know, the way that, you know, we even think about rent control, for instance, is like, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine that. Well, we had that up until the 80s. And so it's constantly like reminding people of maybe things that they knew, or maybe for younger readers, things that they didn't know, to be like, the way that you are oppressed now via rent is not how it's always been. And it doesn't have to be this way.
Yeah. And even if you don't want to look historically, you could look around the world and see that it's not done this way.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
That's
Imagine
always
that.
interesting. Yeah, imagine looking elsewhere. Listeners, go back to the episode with Lola Olufemi, which is what this is reminding me of. Experimenting, imagining otherwise, where the entire book is about like, how do we imagine the otherwise, right? The things could always be otherwise. That's what that's reminding me of. Like, and by giving us this history, but also this like personal history and cultural history, you're allowing us to see different ways of like being and doing, which I think is so important. And then, yeah, that third paragraph, you kind of then zoom out even further, right? Which is one of the moves of the book, is to go like in, textured, and then out. The story of how these tissue boxes journey to Britain is hard to pin down. And then you get these two quite long sentences, actually, of the more neutral, objective, like history. But even there, like Mughal emperors often embellished metal boxes. with rich textiles and gem set jewelry, transforming courts into luxury residences. Like even the language starts getting like luxurious and rich. Like you're not just giving us history, but you're giving us history. I don't know. Yeah, again, like the texture of history, right? The feel of history. Like this isn't just like, oh, let me tell you who like the Mughal dynasty were or like what they were about, but rather like why were these things important to them? You know, which again is, you know, I don't know what you call that, but like the material history rather than it's not like who, why, and when. It's like what emerged and why.
Yeah, and like to try and give you a little sense of the material conditions of that time and being like, okay, I'm just using that, you know, Sontag method of zooming in a hyper specific way on one single thing in order that you might feel something about that time of history. And, you know, whether you know it or you don't, maybe you don't know how the box situates itself in that court. And my hope is that now you do.
Yeah, and there's this like, I don't know, it's just quite a wild link, right? To be like, oh, okay, these tissue boxes begin in like the royal courts of Mughal emperors, and now they're like in my grandparents' like front room.
Yeah.
Like in an imitation, but like it's still the thing. Like the grand sweep of history is like is in everyone's homes, right? Like history is like not out there, it's like in here.
Yeah.
And I think this book just does such a great job of grounding that.
I think it's very easy to be parochial, you know, as British people, you know, as a Welsh person.
Thank you.
And, you know, I think there is also our responsibility to write against that and be like, I am situated in this place, yes. However, I'm connected to global conversations.
Yeah.
And, you know, we find methods in which to do that. And, you know, I really wanted to use the object of a tissue box to maybe like start that discourse and being like, it's okay that there might not be a year zero for many objects that we surround ourselves with. That's fine. What is important here is the thinking and the connection, not necessarily like the factual accuracy of knowing an exact year zero that a thing came to exist.
Yeah, which is you feeling your way through like the things that make most sense, right? And I want to transition to talking about your writing, which is funny because like I feel like I was present for the writing of this book, but at the same time I don't know, we haven't really talked about it in any depth of like I mean, I know you often write in bed, like I know, and you're not the first person on the podcast to do so, so that's not a read. Like
right.
Many people have said they
feels
write
like
in
one,
but like what is your writing process, or at least for this book? Were you writing daily? What was your setup? But also like how did you transition from like your shorter form journalism to book length and memoir, which you really hadn't done it to that degree before? You'd written essays, but not really like this.
The way that I transition to writing book length is by writing chapters at a time and being like, okay, that's far more manageable, like writing 5,000 words at a time. And I was very lucky because I sent each chapter to my editor. So I was like, okay, this feels like it's doable. This is the longest thing I've ever written. And I'm not daunted by that because of that process. But I think I would be because I know that some editors are like, oh, I just want to see the finished book. And so they want 80,000 words delivered. And yeah, I don't think I'd be able to do that. So that's how I did that. I think the writing process, it has to happen for me in the house. So, like you say, partly in bed, partly at my desk. But I feel like, you know, I have to be outside gathering, you know, in a reporter kind of way. So, you know, like I write notes on my phone, I do voice notes for myself, I do voice memos, and I kind of feel like that enables me to take the temperature of conversations from strangers, conversations with friends, things that people are thinking about, things that are happening in media, like tabloid headlines, you know, that are so funny. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is the world that we inhabit. okay, cool. Let me think about something like that, and then come back, and then I'll write. And so I don't have a fixed amount of words that I write a day. I just know that when that flash of inspiration comes to me, I have to like write maybe for like days at a time. And I need to have coffee, and that's the only constant.
Or cups of tea. Like
Yeah.
we've consumed much tea and biscuits.
But also, like, you know, I'm thinking about our relationship, and, you know, leaning on clever friends and clever thoughts, and being like, oh, actually, you know, writing can feel so solitary, as we know.
Yep.
And so I don't know why I'm guarding this thought. Maybe I can share it with you. What do you think about this?
Yeah.
And, you know, I think, you know, I'm a freelancer, and I don't necessarily think that that is conducive to like shared ownership of an idea or sharing full stop, you know. And I am really grateful to be able to have a support system in my life that allows me to do that, because I don't think I'm cut out for a full-time office job in that way.
Yeah. But you're right. It could easily become so like atomized that you're on your own just with your like, which is maybe why so many like think pieces are so flawed. You're like, did you talk to your friends about this?
Yeah.
Like people are like, I've got this take, and I'm like, send it to the group chat first. People might be like, no, we don't need to hear your thoughts on Odysseus and Penelope. Do you know what I mean?
You know that Gemma Kirk meme that's like, I think you might be thinking about yourself too much?
Very much that.
Very much that.
But yeah, sharing, like, because I remember we had a long conversation about like the experience of halls, right? And that moment of moving to London, both of us, and being like, oh, class is a thing. In a way that I wasn't very conscious of in Wales, right?
Yeah, I
around
think
people
social mobility might be a lie.
Yeah, I don't know what point we looked at each other and were like,
now what?
Different.
That kind of false understanding that if you've read those texts that exist in the canon, that will really enhance your writing. And I think it took me some time after I graduated, actually, to realize that that's a complete fallacy, and being like, oh, okay, that's not what makes me a great writer, that I've read Wolfe and Shakespeare. Is that I have a point of view.
But that was one of the parts of, I guess, an undergraduate training is like, what do you think, though? You know, and again, this is a plea for the humanities, given the crisis that we're in this country and elsewhere. They're like, the courses that develop critical thinking are the ones being cut right now, right? The ones that say, like, you go into a room and you say, like, what do you think about this thing we just gave you? And people share their thoughts and opinions, and you debate them and you discuss them. It's not like, what is the mathematical formula? There's nothing to debate about that, right? But like, our training was literally, what is your perspective? You can't leave the classroom not really having a thought about this poem, right? Like, you've got to have a take. And boy, did we have takes. When do you first remember thinking about writing or being like, I'm a writer, that's the thing I'm going to do when I'm old?
I think when I was younger, I wrote a lot of fiction in the form of short stories. And I think that for a child especially, that's a really great way to like funnel your imaginative impulses, you know, and you have so much imagination. And, you know, probably like a lot of writers, I was like a reader.
Yeah.
I wasn't really like out doing a boisterous play. I was sitting quietly and well behaved in the corner reading my book. And then, you know, I kept a diary, so I've always done some form of like nonfiction writing, and then I did a degree, and a lot of that was like writing essays, and then on the side I did bits and bobs of journalistic writing. And then when I graduated, I was like, I think that that's what I want to pursue. So, you know, I really made it my business to think about and report on different worlds that I occupied. And then, you know, at this stage of my life, would probably like to be a career author or at least maybe write another book after this. And so, thinking in those terms of like not only the craft, but what are the possibilities of the craft? What else can it do? How can it expand itself beyond like 2,000, 5,000 words even? And having those expansive horizons is so important as a person, but also as a writer.
I love that. And obviously you've done other kind of media too, right? Podcasting, TV, radio, all the things, right? That again, like always about communicate, like how do I communicate this thing that I care about or I'm interested in, right? Often the group text is, hey, did you know that the moon? I'm like, oh my God, what are you researching today? Like, what is going on? And that like interest in like the stuff, right, is like the through line. I know you also teach creative writing sometimes, and you've done some like non-fictiony stuff. Do you have any like prompts or lessons or things that you get students to do that you'd want to share?
So, yeah, the module that I teach is called Writing Life. It's about the essay as a form. And so we like study and look at and read and think about many essayists, from George Orwell to Sontag to Toni Morrison, across the whole range, really. And so one exercise I do that I'm always like fascinated by is like getting people just to list what they can see around them. And it is always illuminating because, a lot of students really struggle with that because of what Hanif Qureshi calls the rush to profundity. There is a kind of like rush to be profound and being like, oh, this makes me feel like this, looking at their phone, they're like, communication. And I'm like, no, let's just strip it right back. Glass, and I think that actually, even for me, has been like a real exercise that I do all the time to be like, what can I see exactly? All the other abstract stuff can come later, but what are the objects that I can see? What do I choose to see? What do I choose not to? And let's have conversations about emission.
Again, like the materiality, right?
Yeah.
God, you're such a Marxist. But like,
Thank you.
Like, yes, you're such a Marxist, brackets, complimentary, not derogatory, as we are often called, us folks. But yeah, like the phone, as though like the phone means communication, my friends, connection. You're like, or glass, plastic, the interior parts, so you've got your plastic bottle. I'm like noticing how much plastic is around me now. Like you even said that, right? Just like the world is saturated with that. Okay, I might try this afterwards. Like, see, I usually do a version of that, but I don't think I get them to like list it in such depth. I'm usually like, draw one thing you can see and write down one thing you can hear, that like just anything that's like drawn to you. But I like the idea of like listing all the stuff and seeing what's omitted, like what things do not make the list.
Yeah, and having that time constraint of a minute, I think, is like a really good exercise, because suddenly people are like maybe looking at you and are maybe, I don't know, thinking differently to what they expect. Like a literary degree to be like. It's like, let's just strip this right back. And, people that have been writing for years and years do the same thing as well. That is a crucial part of the craft. And, it's easy to dismiss that maybe and feel like, oh, I need to think about what it all means. And yeah.
Less profundity, people. Okay, last question I ask everyone. What books are you going to recommend? New things, old things, stuff not yet out? I was like guessing in my head what you might pick, but I don't know what you're going to pick.
Well, my book is in dialogue with Eula Bliss's book on having and being had. And I think that is also a really good example of narrative nonfiction that does the work of fiction, but also educates and like strips back completely, and I love it because of that. Obviously, because of the content of it, but I think it does a really elegant, light touch work of like telling us about the place that she lives in. I also really love Sam Johnson-Schlee's Living Rooms, which is like a full-length essay that was turned into a very slim book. But again, he like does that kind of abstract fiction work of being like, this is what you see around you, but maybe let's think deeper about it. And I really like Kyle Chayka's The Longing for Less, because I think really good examples of strong nonfiction do that job really well. You know, it's a book about minimalism as a mode of cultural production. So he's talking about like it as an art form, as an interior form, as a sonic form. And you know, he's saying this is the way that we can learn and think about this. And yeah, I really like that. I mean, I'm a non-fiction girly.
Of course.
I read a lot of it, and sometimes I'm like, ooh, this is very academic in tone, you know, it's like hard going. And then sometimes I read something that I'm like, wow, that was so easy, so beautiful. And I think that that is not often a word thrown around to describe nonfiction.
Agreed.
In a way that, you know, it's maybe easier for poetry and fiction to be beautiful and to like have imaginative landscapes, you know, and for you to be drawn into that. It's a lot more difficult, I think, for nonfiction, especially if, you know, like mine is like ostensibly a book about housing. People are like, oh no, you know. And so, you know, I think that that is kind of what piques my interest. I'm like, oh, a book about color, a book about heating. Oh yeah, baby. And so, yeah, I think that kind of acrobatic work of like a writer being like, let me sidestep this, let me see what I can do with the subject, is like so like fascinating and beautiful to witness. I love it as a reader. But also saying that, I always recommend Writing a Society of Memory by Toni Morrison as a way of thinking about where we've been and how we write that. And also Yaa Gyasi's Homegoing as a way of saying this is grounded in reality, you know, in the way that Toni Morrison did with The Bluest Eye. Like, you have taken something from the headlines and something that has been reported on and created a fictional world around it. And yeah, I think it's very definitely done. Also, it's like a masterclass in saying a lot in very little. It's like a very thin book and it covers so much ground. Yeah, I love that.
Amazing. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to make sure I cover nonfiction books on a close reading podcast, right? Because everyone's like, you're just going to talk poetry every week. I'm like, no, I want to talk about other kinds of books, right? You can close read anything. I can close read anything you put in front of me.
You can, yeah.
But like, I think it's important, right? It's important to say that like nonfiction is language too, right? Like, you're an author that has made linguistic choices that we need to attend to. I'm surprised you did not mention Hanif Abdurraqib's A Little Devil in America.
Like, oh my gosh, such poetic and beautiful and masterly nonfiction. Like, you know, that kind of like beautiful management of a theme.
Yeah.
It is masterful, but it also takes the reader on a journey as you, as a writer, metabolize all these events. And, you know, many of those things I recognize, even though I'm maybe of a different generation.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, yeah, that does shape the world that I live in. Of course, that shapes my cultural taste. Yeah. Of course it does. And that in turn shapes the person that I am, the person that you are, the person that we all are. And yeah, I just love that ability to make those connections.
Yeah. a book I'm never not thinking about. So
Yeah.
listeners, if you have not read that book, go read that book. The essay on Whitney Houston alone will make you cry, and go and watch every video. She's like, yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you for those beautiful recommendations, and thank you so much for your time. This has been a joy.
Oh, thank you. It is such a joy and such a pleasure to speak to a clever person, of course, but also for someone who has such reverence for like books and the written form, and to be like, yeah, this is important. Yeah, beauty, joy as a resistance. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode. Go back to episode 8 with Lola Olufemi on Imagining Otherwise, which I mentioned in the episode, or maybe go to episode 8 with Tausif Khan, where we talked about migration and home in quite a different context. Please subscribe to the show if you haven't already, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or on YouTube, share with people in all the places, follow the show and me on Instagram, tag me in any posts of episodes you like, and if you can, please do fill out the feedback form linked in the show notes. You can also get show transcripts once I get them done, and more information about the show by subscribing to the Substack. The show was made possible by an Impact Accelerator Award from the University of Hertfordshire and the Arts and Humanities Research Council.